All right, let's talk about selling, okay? That's what this is all about. Let's talk about why conversations win in pharma and device. So in pharmaceutical and device sales, there's all this conversation about AI, right? Like, is AI going to do away with sales reps? But here's the truth. Data does not win in and of itself. Neither does your brand. What wins is having those conversations, because there's all this information out there. I mean, every single year, there are new FDA approvals. And you know what? That doctor is not going to make decisions just based on data. They often need a person who can communicate, a person that they trust. And even in this society where we see this innovation with AI, I don't think the role of a salesperson is going anywhere. Why? Sometimes AI conflicts, right? How many of you look at your phone and AI is just kind of like your encourager, right? Like you talk to your ChatGPT and it's like your motivational speaker. It's almost like your Oprah and Joel Osteen, just pumping you up, making you feel good about yourself. But sometimes in sales, you need someone to tell you the brutal truth, right? And then when you have conflicting ideas of data, you need a person who can communicate. Here's the truth. How many times have we asked AI to tell us something and we just forget about it? It's harder to forget a person. That doctor will remember you. That nurse who you go in, you talk to that nurse, that staff, and you empathize, you ask questions about what they're facing, their challenges, and then you can see if you can bring about some solutions when you help them. They will remember you. So today, we're going to work on this. We're going to talk about selling. It's a method that I use called ask and align. And then after we ask and align, we can then tell the story. What about ask and align? That means we got to ask good questions. We ask to understand. We ask to get the perspective of the person that we're talking to. It may be the doctor, it may be the nurse. And then we align to build trust. We ask to understand, we align to build trust, and then we tell the story of impact that works in medical device, it works in pharmaceutical, it works in diagnostics, it even works in interviews. Before we ever ask questions and align and sell, what comes first is pre-call planning. Pre-call planning. Elite reps never show up unprepared. Before you ever meet a physician, a nurse practitioner, a pharmacist, administrator, you should already know about them. What's their specialty? What's their clinical focus? Their patient population, their ordering history, their current therapies or devices, their schedule, their clinic flow, the key decision makers. You use every tool available to you. How can you gather data? It may be your CRM, the territory analytics, hospital websites. It may be conference publications, even their clinical interests if they publish research. I've done this so many times. I go in to talk to a doctor and just briefly mention an article that they wrote. Just briefly, just kind of throw it out there. See, preparation builds confidence. Lack of preparation puts you in a reactive position. You want to be proactive. Elite reps win before they ever enter the room. Why? They know that doctor. They know their ordering history, who they've been using. You can look, and one way to do this is not just look in your CRM, but when you're new in the job, if you're in pharma, it's likely that there might be a different division in your own company that calls on that same account. Talk to them. See if you can figure it out. Look at the ordering patterns. Use every tool available to you. I want to talk to you about asking good questions. How do we ask questions without being pushy? Now, elite reps do not just rush into information. Well, here's our product. They begin with curiosity. Before ever mentioning a product or a device, they want to understand who's the physician, who are they seeing? How are those patients currently being treated right now? Elite reps want to understand who's that physician currently seeing. Do you happen to see patients who have EGFR mutations? How are you currently treating them? They want to understand, hey, where does the struggle lie? So instead of asking that doctor, hey, let me talk about my new therapy, ask good questions. Say, doctor, I'm curious. What types of patients are you seeing right now with this particular disease state? How are you currently treating them? Where do you feel the biggest challenge is in managing these patients? Oh, you're using such and such treatment. How's it working? How's it administered? What's the adverse reactions that you're seeing to it? And then you can say, like in oncology, I mentioned it, you say, hey, doctor, are you calling on any non-small cell lung cancer patients who have the MET mutation currently? Are you currently seeing those patients? How are you treating them? Where are you feeling the most pressure? How are your patients responding to that treatment? So I'm not just coming in with my product, right? I'm asking questions to say, doctor, I want to understand how you're currently treating them. And as I ask questions, I can empathize with them, right? I can try to find some common ground. One, it's a big plus if they're even noticing patients with this disease. It could be a big plus that they're actually treating them, right, in a particular way. Maybe a targeted treatment instead of chemotherapy, right? And you ask these questions that allows us to align. We ask questions and then we ask the follow-up question. Sometimes the follow-up question is the most powerful. I think with our reps, our tendency is to think, because so many of us, we face that doctor who says, I don't have time for you. You got 2 minutes, right? How many of us have faced that with doctors? You got 2 minutes. Hey, I don't have time for this. And so sometimes we can be tempted to just assume that the doctor doesn't want to talk to us. But if we can ask the right question at the right time, we can allow them to talk. And we can do the follow-up question. So if they say, well, I've seen only 2 of these patients with this MET mutation in the last year. Oh, really? Wow. A lot of people never see this. If you can empathize with them and say, how are you currently treating them? How are they responding to treatment? And you allow them to start talking about how this patient is responding. After you listen, then you can align. This is where you listen, okay? Our tendency is to do not a follow-up question, but to do a question that jumps over to a different issue. Well, doctor, have you heard about this? Or doctor, what about patients with such and such? And here it is. There's an article that was done by Harvard Business Review. I think Leslie John was one of the authors of it, but it was called The Surprising Power of Questions. They did this whole study. And there is power in follow-up questions. If a doctor says, I'm seeing side effects, one of the things for you to begin to practice on is to slow down. Even if the doctor seems like they're in a hurry. You empathize with them. If a doctor says access is difficult, like if a surgeon says, I prefer this device that I already use, you pause, you say, look, I appreciate that. What do you like most about that product? And what that says is, like, I'm listening to you. It shows curiosity, humility, emotional intelligence, true partnerships. You're not interrogating, you're uncovering. You're honoring their expertise by slowing the pace of the conversation. Most reps rush because they think the doctor is in a hurry. But when a physician senses that you're truly listening, they often slow down for you. The more you stay with their answer, the more you build trust. So after that, we align. Listening, empathy, respect. After you have listened, your next responsibility is alignment. Alignment is the moment the physician realizes, this guy, he understands my reality. I can see why managing rash and diarrhea, that would be exhausting for these chemotherapy patients. Like your nursing team comes in and they're overwhelmed and overworked and they're trying to manage these side effects of chemotherapy. Rather than just going in with your product and all this, empathize with the challenge these patients, these side effects these patients have. It makes sense that an infusion chair time creates such serious pressure. I can understand the balance in efficacy with tolerability. It feels like a burden. So alignment says that you respect what they're currently doing. These nurses, they work so hard, but if you can empathize with them, right? And understand there's challenges. There's going to be adverse reactions. And that way, when you go in to talk about your product, and maybe there's a challenge with your product, it's not perfect, there's side effects with your product as well, you understand the whole situation. Alignment lowers defenses. Alignment creates psychological safety. Safety builds trust. After we ask questions and we align, then we can tell. This is connecting the science to their reality. After you ask and align, do you tell the story? Your story is never generic, right? Like when you get the job, especially pharmaceutical sales, you'll have your visual aid and you'll be able to use these tools, but you don't have time to read it all. You don't have time to go through the whole thing, but can you look a physician in the eye and meet them where they are? Well, how do you do that? Well, if you've asked the right questions and if you've asked and aligned, then you can tell the story. So, look, hey, doctor, based on what you told me about infusion burden, this is where our data becomes relevant. Based on what you shared with me about your concern about adverse reaction, this is why our therapy may help. Based on your concern about workflow, this is where our technology fits. When you tell the story, you include three things. Number one, a clinical or workflow pattern. You can show the data, the efficacy of your story. Maybe show them just one picture, one slide. And then you can show the patient outcome with a clear data point. And then you give a brief mention of the adverse reactions. When you do this, you're showing transparency. You're showing credibility. If you go in there like, our drug is better, this, and this, and this, and you don't mention the adverse reactions or the side effects, they're just thinking they're trying to sell me something. And that's why when doctors come in, they say, look, you got 2 minutes. And a doctor comes in and says, hey, you got 2 minutes. And I say, doctor, I don't want to sell you something if it's not right for your patient. And I'm not sure, but do you happen to see patients who ever have the exon 20 insertion mutation with non-small cell lung cancer? Because I'm not sure if our product would be right. And you start asking questions about their patients. And likewise, when you're going through that efficacy story of your product, it's so good to go, for good measure, talk about those adverse reactions. And that is true in the whole interview process. When someone says, well, why do you want to work here for this company? And you're just like, oh, I like this, and this, and this. Well, that sounds good, but what if you asked a very curious question about the competition? I've talked to your reps, but it seems to me that one of the challenges is that such and such is company actually has better overall survival. How are you guys handling that? I'm just curious. Oh, this rep has done their research. They understand that our competition is actually better than us in this area. And for good measure, you're not just kissing up to them, saying all the positive. You're bringing about this negative concern as well. And you just calmly say it. If you're calm and there's conversations with both doctors and hiring managers, asking questions, the follow-up question, ask and align, then you can tell the story. How do we think outside the box with access? We know ever since COVID, there's been this excuse, well, we don't see reps. We don't do lunches anymore. In specialty pharma, there's an app. It's called RX Vantage. Anybody heard of RX Vantage? It's an app in which reps will schedule their lunches, their in-services. Here's the challenge. It's all booked out. It's really hard. You got to jump on at the first of the year. Some of these accounts, you might only have one lunch the entire year. So how do you meet with them? Well, one, who is it in that office that you can build trust with? There's a nurse manager at one of these large cancer centers here. I stopped by, I began talking about things that she was concerned about, what she was passionate about. She was preparing to do the Pelotonia bike ride. Well, guess what? I was for the first year as well. 50 miles on my bike. I was pretty slow on it. It's good exercise, but it was for a great cause for cancer here in Columbus, Ohio. Well, she was training for it too, built trust, began asking questions. I said, I really wanted to do a lunch here, but it looks like you're booked out for the year. And I began asking questions. She allowed me to do a coffee bar and bring in coffee. What does that do? Well, it's thinking outside the box. It's allowing nurses to come by, and guess what? They have to stand there. Like when you do an in-service with lunch, how many of you in the field have had a doctor or nurse just come by and just kind of grab their plate and go? They're out the door. They don't want to talk to you as reps. But when you're ordering your coffee, you got to slow down. Hey, do you happen to see patients who have such and such? Well, actually, we just had one of those last week, right? So it was a way for me to think outside the box. That allowed us to have a dinner program there and other meetings as well. So what is it about you? How can you start to think outside the box, not just with your job, but with the whole interview process? We think about LinkedIn. I teach you processes here, but what is it that you can do outside the box to actually meet with people? It's not overly weird. You don't have to overly complicate it, but you can meet with people. I remember one time, when I took a job, they said that you just can't access this major academic center. The truth is our company had been beaten by our competition. And the competition, it was just they were outspending us with sponsorships. They liked their drug better than ours because of less side effects. They didn't even know us in this division. So I knew I couldn't just get in there and start talking about our product, why we were better, and extend, the patient's life. But I had to take an interest. It showed up, it was me showing up, getting our company to sponsor the Pelotonia, getting our company to sponsor their large awareness for lung cancer. And then the grand rounds, when they did lectures, I would show up Friday morning early and start talking to the doctors. Also, I realized, these academic accounts, they don't want reps just walking in there. What could I do to schedule Zoom calls at the physician's availability? So this is what I did. I tracked down, I created an Excel spreadsheet with the admin of every single doctor. And I would start scheduling quarterly Zoom calls. And guess what? If there's a doctor that I couldn't access, I just name drop. Hey, I was talking to Dr. So-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so, your colleagues. We schedule quarterly Zoom calls. And I know you're busy, but I was wondering if you had any availability next week or the week after. Oh, well, if so-and-so and so-and-so is doing it, I better do one too, right? So it's leveraging thinking outside the box. Now, we ask, we align, and at the right time, we tell the story. I want you to think about right now, in this whole process of trying to land a job, what can you do to think outside the box, to be more creative, to get your foot in front of more hiring managers, but also other reps who might open up the door for you? What can you do? Now, I think at the right time, we got to continue to cultivate these relationships. So one thing I just want to share with you, that as be a person, right? Like, just show that you're real, take an interest in others, ask questions. Is there something about that doctor or that hiring manager that you can ask questions? For those of you in the industry, what can you do to take an interest? If you're trying to break into the industry, what can you do to just build trust? Maybe you're doing a ride along with one of the reps. Just be likable. I remember talking to Doug Jacobson, Sanofi. He hired me over all these other reps who had more experience. I didn't have any pharma sales experience. I'd been in diagnostics, but not pharma. I said, Doug, why did you hire me? He's like, well, I think you do a good job of selling. You did a good job in the interview. But you were lacking in the clinical knowledge, and you didn't have relationships here in Columbus because you live in Texas. But I have to say that I hired you because I liked you. I asked myself the question as a hiring manager, said, Doug, that if I had to be in a car with this person for 2 hours, would I like them? Would I enjoy the conversation? What about you? Do people like being with you? Well, if you're not sure, the greatest way is not by just talking about yourself, it's by what? Asking them questions, bringing value to them, showing an interest in them. And if you do that, you'll build trust.
If you're trying to break into medical device or pharmaceutical sales, or maybe you're ready to reinvent yourself into a new specialty like oncology, our program, Medical Sales U, can help.
I'm extremely grateful for Dave Starrett and his program, Medical Sales U.
I'm now making $60,000 more than I was as a pharmacist.
I highly recommend the program. I just landed an incredible dream job.
Our members come from every background: nurses, pharmacists, teachers, athletes, and they're breaking in fast, averaging $151,875 in 11 and a half weeks. Many are earning over $200K. The industry is changing lives. You can change lives. Check us out, Medical Sales U. Invest in yourself, and let's get you in the game.